The architect's debt. My stepmother stole my father's firm with a forged codicil, so I let her build a skyscraper on a sinkhole. Before we continues, please subscribe and leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. Your support helps this powerful life-changing story reach the world. My name is Elara. I was raised in the sterile, sharp-edged world of architectural precision. While other children played with plastic blocks, I was sitting in my father's atelier, tracing the load-bearing walls of cathedrals and the cantilevered balconies of modern marvels. My father, Elara Vance, was a visionary who transformed the city skyline with Vance Architectural Group. He taught me that a building is only as strong as the ground beneath, a lesson that would later become my weapon. By 28, I was the lead project manager, responsible for the structural integrity of our most ambitious designs. I loved the smell of concrete dust and the rhythmic staccato of jackhammers. I thought my position as the heir to the firm was as permanent as the steel beams we bolted into the earth. The cracks in our foundation appeared the day Victoria walked into the office. She was a lifestyle consultant with a smile that never quite reached her eyes and a talent for convincing wealthy men that their lives were incomplete without her. Within a year, she had married my father in a lavish ceremony that felt more like a corporate takeover. Victoria hated the grime of construction sites and pressured my father to pivot from artistic architecture to high-density, low-quality real estate development. She saw the firm not as a legacy, but as a turbocharged cash machine. When I blocked her attempts to cut costs on structural reinforcements, she realized I was the only barrier to the massive wealth she coveted. She began rewriting his social circle, slowly isolating him from the engineers and partners who had built the firm alongside him. My father's health declined with terrifying speed. What began as simple forgetfulness escalated into a debilitating neurological condition. Victoria seized the opportunity with predatory precision. She converted the guest house into a private clinic, firing his long-term physicians and hiring a medical team that reported only to her. She controlled the flow of information, telling me he was too fragile for visitors. I had to fight through layers of security just to see him for 10 minutes. He looked like a shadow of the man who had designed skyscrapers. He was frail, heavily medicated, and barely recognized his own sketches. When he passed away in his sleep, the grief hit me like a demolition ball. I had lost my guiding light, but Victoria didn't even wait for the flowers to wilt before she summoned the lawyers. The will reading was held in the firm's own boardroom, a space my father had designed to radiate transparency. Victoria sat at the head of the table, clad in designer morning wear. Her attorney, a man known for navigating the gray areas of estate law, produced a codicil supposedly signed by my father 2 weeks before his death. This document completely overturned the original partnership agreement. Instead of the firm passing to me, 90% of the shares and all controlling interests were transferred to Victoria. I was left with a single, insulting bequest, a collection of his old drafting tools and a consulting role with no voting power. The signature on the document was shaky, a poor imitation of a man whose hand had been the steadiest in the industry. It was a blatant, calculated theft. "This is a forgery," I declared, my voice cold and steady despite the roaring in my ears. Victoria simply dabbed at a tearless eye. "He realized you lacked the vision to scale the business, Elara. He wanted me to bring Vance Group into the modern age." Within an hour, security escorted me out of the building that bore my name. I packed my drafting tools into a rusty toolbox, watching as Victoria's new corporate crony began peeling my name off the office door. I was exiled from my own legacy, left with nothing but my education and a reputation that Victoria was already working to smear. I moved into a small studio apartment, spending weeks analyzing the few documents I had managed to save, searching for a crack in her armor. While digging through my father's old personal journals, the ones Victoria deemed worthless junk, I found a set of deed maps from the 1920s. They pertained to the firm's crown jewel, the Titan Plaza development site, a massive plot in the heart of the financial district where Victoria planned to build a 70-story luxury tower. As I studied the geological surveys attached to the ancient deed, I realized something my father had kept in a separate legal entity. The land wasn't just land. The air rights and the subsurface rights had been decoupled decades ago. My grandfather had placed the subsurface rights, the actual bedrock upon which any foundation must be anchored, into a dormant family trust that was triggered only upon the death of the last male heir. I took the deeds to a specialized real estate litigator. The conclusion was staggering. Victoria had stolen the firm and the surface land rights. She owned the dirt. But I owned the bedrock. Legally, any building exceeding 3 stories on that site required pilings to be drilled directly into the bedrock I controlled. Without my permission, she couldn't anchor a skyscraper. She was sitting on the most expensive piece of dirt in the country, but she had no legal right to touch the hard ground beneath it. My lawyer asked if we should notify her immediately. No, I replied, remembering Harper's strategy. Let her spend every dime she stole on the Puri construction. Let her sign the contracts. Let her build on the sinkhole of her own arrogance. Victoria wasted no time. She announced the Vance Prestige Tower. A project so ambitious it required hundreds of millions in pre-sales and external financing. She fired our long-term structural engineers, replacing them with a cheap firm that promised to use lower-grade steel and less depth in the foundation to save on costs. She was so blinded by the projected profits that she never conducted a new independent title search for the subsurface rights. She simply assumed the old corporate deed covered everything from the center of the earth to the sky. She was already selling penthouses to international billionaires, taking non-refundable deposits that she immediately used to fund her radiant new lifestyle. To fund the massive excavation and the procurement of specialized steel, Victoria took out a series of high-stakes loans, leveraging the entirety of the Vance Architectural Group as collateral. She was so confident in the Titan project that she committed the firm to a some certain construction contract. This meant that any delay, any legal halt, or any failure to reach bedrock by a certain date would result in massive daily penalties that would bankrupt the firm in weeks. She was strapping a financial atomic bomb to the legacy she stole, thinking she was untouchable. I watched from the shadows as the groundbreaking ceremony was broadcast on the news, Victoria wearing a gold-plated hard hat, smiling at the cameras. The excavation began. The giant drills moved in, tearing through the topsoil. I waited until the very moment the first piling hit the 60-foot mark, the exact depth where the private trust's subsurface rights began. That afternoon, Arthur, my attorney, and I filed a federal cease and desist and a property trespass injunction. We didn't just send it to Victoria. We sent it to the lenders, the city building inspectors, and every single billionaire who had paid a deposit on a penthouse. The message was simple. You are drilling into private property without an easement. Cease all operations immediately or face criminal trespass charges. The roar of the excavator stopped at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. The city building inspectors, accompanied by 2 deputy sheriffs, served the federal injunction directly to the foreman. Victoria was at a luxury spa when her phone began to vibrate uncontrollably. The lenders had seen the filing. The sudden halt in construction triggered a material adverse change clause in her loan agreement. Within an hour, her accounts were frozen. She rushed to the site in her designer robe, screaming at the officers, but the law was as rigid as the bedrock she could no longer touch. Victoria summoned an emergency board meeting, desperate to spin the injunction as a minor zoning dispute. But the board members, already nervous about the aggressive scaling, had read the subsurface deed. You told us the title was clear, the lead investor snapped. Victoria tried to blame my father, claiming he had hidden the trust to sabotage her. I walked into the boardroom uninvited, wearing my dust-stained work boots. I didn't need a vote. I held the only key to the ground they were standing on. The look of pure, radiant malice on her face was the best interest I had ever earned. With the project halted, the daily penalties from the construction contract began to accrue, $100,000 a day. Victoria had no liquid capital left. She had spent it on the gala and the penthouse deposits. She was forced to seek an emergency bridge loan from a private equity firm. Little did she know, that firm was a shell company I had established with the last of my personal savings and the backing of my father's loyal partners. I was now her landlord and her lender. As the pressure mounted, Victoria's composure shattered. She began drinking heavily, harassing the remaining staff, and accusing the engineers of conspiracy. She tried to forge a counter-easement, but without my father to manipulate, she had to rely on the same shady lawyer who had helped her steal the firm. We were ready. We had a private investigator watching his office. The moment he logged into the county records to attempt a fraudulent filing, we had him on tape. With the lawyer under pressure from the Bar Association, he cracked. He confessed that the codicil giving Victoria the firm had indeed been forged. He revealed that Victoria had guided my father's hand while he was in a medicated stupor, recording the act on her phone for security before deleting it, or so she thought. The cloud server had saved a backup. We seized the recording. The smoking gun wasn't just a metaphor. It was a digital file showing her smiling as she forced a dying man to sign away his life's work. The news broke on the front page of the business section. Vance Architectural Group built on forgery and fraud. The international billionaires demanded their deposits back immediately. Victoria tried to flee to the Cayman Islands, but her passport had been flagged due to the ongoing federal investigation into the subsurface trespass. She was trapped in the penthouse she had stolen, watching the clock tick toward total bankruptcy. The bridge loan I had extended to her through the shell company came due. Victoria had $0 to pay the $10 million balloon payment. I initiated hostile foreclosure proceedings against the Vance Architectural Group. Because the firm's only remaining asset was the toxic Titan project, no other buyer would touch it. At the public auction held on the steps of City Hall, I submitted the winning bid, $1 and the cancellation of her debt. I walked back into the Vance offices as the owner, not the consultant. The first thing I did was rehire every engineer and architect Victoria had fired. We tore down her lifestyle decor and reinstalled my father's original drafting tables. The name on the door was the same, but the soul of the firm had finally returned. I sat in my father's chair, feeling the weight of the responsibility and the satisfaction of justice. Victoria was given 24 hours to vacate the family estate. She tried to take the artwork and the jewelry, but I had already filed a writ of attachment. Everything she had purchased with the firm's money was now property of the restructured Vance Group. She left the estate in a taxi, carrying nothing but a cheap suitcase and the crimson dress she had worn to her triumphant groundbreaking. To fully clear the Titan site, I ordered a new independent geological survey. The results were shocking. Victoria's cheap engineers had ignored a massive underground aquifer. If she had drilled without my permission, the entire skyscraper would have tilted within 5 years, causing a catastrophic collapse. Her greed hadn't just been criminal, it had been suicidal. I shared the findings with the press, cementing her reputation as the most dangerous fraud in the city's history. The district attorney moved swiftly. Victoria was charged with grand larceny, elder abuse, and fraud. Her shark lawyer turned state's evidence to save his own skin. During the trial, I sat in the front row, watching as the recording of the forgery was played for the jury. The gasp in the courtroom was the sound of a dynasty of deceit finally breaching. Victoria was sentenced to 15 years in a state penitentiary. No luxury spas, no designer gowns, no champagne. She would spend the next decade wearing orange polyester and eating from plastic trays. As she was led away in handcuffs, she looked at me with a look of utter bewilderment. She still didn't understand that you can't build the future if you steal the past. I already designed the Titan project from scratch. It wouldn't be a hollow luxury tower. It would be a sustainable, mixed-use hub that integrated the natural aquifer into a public park at the base. I named the foundation Julian's Bedrock. The project became the new standard for ethical architecture, attracting investors who valued integrity over over-leveraged profits. I visited my father's grave, bringing the original deed to the Bedrock Trust. I buried a small copy of the successful occupancy permit beneath the soil. "The house is stable, Dad," I whispered. The city skyline was changing again, but this time the buildings were honest. The firm was thriving, and the legacy was no longer a burden. It was a foundation. It has been 5 years since Victoria's collapse. The Titan Tower stands tall, anchored deep into the bedrock I protected. I am back in the atelier, teaching a new generation of architects that blueprints are just paper. True architecture is the strength to stand your ground. Victoria is a forgotten footnote, a cautionary tale about the danger of building on a sinkhole. I am Elara Vance, and my legacy is finally totally unbreakable.